Right now, significant developments are emerging in global trade, as China has launched investigations into certain U.S. trade practices. At the same time, Canada under Prime Minister Carney continues to pursue diversified economic relationships, including recent steps with Beijing. Early reports and official statements suggest potential implications for Canadian industries and broader North American trade dynamics. Here's what verified sources are telling us, and what you need to know. But what actually led to this situation? What are the real implications for Canada, and what could realistically happen next? Let's break down the facts. Welcome back to Canada Pulse, your trusted source for fact-based updates on Canadian public policy, economy, housing, and national developments. We use verified information from official government sources, credible news outlets, and expert analysis to help you understand what's really happening in Canada. I'm your host, and today we're examining Canada's position amid rising U.S.-China trade frictions and recent Canadian engagement with Beijing, using only confirmed information and responsible interpretation. Now, if you're a farmer in the prairies, a worker in manufacturing, an auto industry employee, a homeowner watching interest rates, or a small business owner reliant on exports, these international developments may influence costs, job conditions, or market access depending on how policies develop over the coming weeks and months. I want to be clear, we're going to walk through this together, step by step, using only what we know for certain, what experts are saying, and what official sources have confirmed. No hype, no guessing, just facts. If you want to stay updated as this story evolves, and trust me, it will continue developing, make sure you're subscribed to Canada Pulse and hit that notification bell so you don't miss critical updates. Before we continue, a quick disclaimer. This video is for informational and educational purposes only. It should not be considered financial, legal, or professional advice. Always verify information with official Canadian government sources like Canada.ca and consult qualified professionals for personal decisions. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear understanding of what's happening right now, why it matters to Canadians, what the potential outcomes could be, and most importantly, what to watch for next. All right, let's start from the beginning. To understand what's happening today, we need to look at how we got here. Here's the thing, this didn't happen overnight. Canada has long balanced its deep economic ties with the United States, our largest trading partner, with efforts to diversify markets. According to official trade data from Statistics Canada and Global Affairs Canada, roughly 70 to 75% of Canadian exports typically head south of the border. Tensions with the U.S. have been notable in recent periods, particularly around tariffs and trade policy under the current administration. At the same time, relations with China, Canada's second-largest trading partner in many metrics, have seen ups and downs over the years, including previous disputes over commodities like canola. Fast forward to January 2026. Prime Minister Carney visited Beijing. This was the first such visit by a Canadian Prime Minister in nearly a decade. Official statements from the Prime Minister's office describe it as an effort to forge a new strategic partnership focused on areas like energy, clean technology, agriculture, and trade barrier reductions. In that visit, preliminary agreements were reached. Canada agreed to a managed opening for a quota of Chinese electric vehicles at a lower tariff rate, while China committed to lowering tariffs on key Canadian agricultural products like canola. This was presented as a pragmatic step to support Canadian exporters amid global uncertainties. Why does this matter? Because trade policy directly touches sectors from prairie farms to Ontario manufacturing and British Columbia ports. Government officials framed it as diversification in a changing world, not a replacement for U.S. ties. So that brings us to what's happening right now. And this is where things get interesting. First, in late March 2026, China's Ministry of Commerce launched 2 trade barrier investigations into U.S. practices. According to Reuters and official Chinese statements, these reciprocal probes examine measures affecting global supply chains and trade in green products. They are scheduled to conclude within 6 months and respond to earlier U.S. Section 301 actions. In simple terms, this reflects ongoing tit-for-tat actions in U.S.-China trade relations. The impact here could affect global markets, including commodities Canada exports, depending on how policies evolve. Second, The January agreements under Prime Minister Carney remain in play. Officials indicated these include tariff adjustments on specific goods and efforts to boost two-way investment in select sectors, with guardrails noted around sensitive technologies. Here's why this matters. Canadian farmers and exporters stand to benefit from improved access to Chinese markets for canola and other products. At the same time, the EV provisions have drawn commentary regarding North American supply chains. And third, this sits against continued Canada-U.S. trade discussions. Experts note that any moves are being watched closely in Washington, with public statements from U.S. officials expressing concerns about alignment within North America. Early signals show Canada emphasizing that these steps support economic resilience without undermining core alliances. If current trends continue, we could see measured adjustments across multiple fronts. Now, let's dig deeper into what analysts and experts are saying about all of this. According to coverage in outlets like the New York Times and Reuters, Carney's approach reflects a pragmatic recalibration aimed at reducing over-reliance on any single market. Economists point out that diversifying trade can provide buffers, especially when U.S. relations face friction. However, others caution about potential risks to integrated North American supply chains, particularly in autos and critical minerals. Here's where it gets technical, but stay with me. The EV quota, for instance, is limited and comes with conditions. In plain English, it's not a full open door but a targeted measure. Counter views from think tanks highlight that closer China ties could complicate USMCA dynamics ahead of reviews. Multiple perspectives exist. Some analysts see opportunity for Canadian agriculture and clean tech. Others worry about strategic dependencies. It probably depends on implementation, global commodity prices, and how negotiations with all partners unfold. Historically, Canada has navigated similar periods by maintaining strong, rules-based trade while seeking new outlets. All right, let's make this personal. Who exactly is affected by this and how? If you work in agriculture, particularly in the prairies, improved access to Chinese markets for canola and related products could support prices and exports, depending on implementation and demand. Sources note this as a potential positive for those sectors. For workers in Ontario and Quebec manufacturing, shifts in EV policy could influence supply chains and investment. The managed approach aims to balance opportunities with existing North American integration. Small businesses tied to international trade should monitor tariff changes. Diversification efforts may open doors, but also require adaptation to new market standards. Broader economic stability affects interest rates, inflation, and housing affordability. Any major trade disruptions could ripple through, though experts emphasize gradual adjustments. Future opportunities in trade, tech, and green industries may evolve based on these partnerships. I know this might feel complex, but remember, we're talking about potential impacts and ongoing developments, not guaranteed outcomes. A lot depends on how governments and markets respond. One thing that's really important to understand: this doesn't affect every part of Canada the same way. Heavy reliance on agriculture and energy in the prairies means potential gains from canola access, alongside energy cooperation discussions. Industry experts track export volumes closely. Ontario and Quebec, as the manufacturing heartland, feel effects of EV and supply chain policies most directly. Balanced integration remains key. British Columbia ports and trade gateways see impacts on container traffic and commodity flows. Housing and resource sectors watch global demand. Atlantic Canada has specific stakes in seafood and resource exports through tariff relief. Drop a comment and let me know which province you're watching from. I'm curious to see where our community is tuning in from today. So what is the federal government actually doing about this? Let's look at the official response. Prime Minister Carney has emphasized pragmatic engagement and economic resilience. Official releases highlight the strategic partnership as focused on mutual interests with clear boundaries. The government continues parallel efforts to manage U.S. relations. Opposition parties have raised questions about strategic alignment and supply chain security, which is a normal part of parliamentary debate. Finance and trade officials monitor developments with tools like adjustment funds and skills training mentioned in responses to broader pressures. What's interesting is the consistent messaging around rules-based trade and diversification without abrupt shifts. Okay, Before we go further, I need to address some misinformation that's circulating online about this topic. Myth number 1. Canada has abandoned its U.S. relationship for China. Reality. Official policy stresses diversification alongside maintaining the core U.S. partnership, which remains by far the largest. No full pivot has occurred. Myth number 2. The deals represent unrestricted open access. Reality. Agreements involve limited quotas, preliminary steps, and ongoing conditions, as reported in credible coverage. Myth number 3. Immediate massive economic collapse or boom is guaranteed. Reality. Impacts are sector-specific and will unfold gradually. Facts are often taken out of context in headlines. This is exactly why it's so important to rely on official sources like Canada.ca, verified news outlets, and credible expert analysis. At Canada Pulse, we commit to fact-checking everything we present. Alright, so now that you understand what's happening, let's talk about what you can actually do with this information. First, bookmark official Canadian government websites. The main one is Canada.ca. For economic data, check Statistics Canada. For trade updates, follow Global Affairs Canada. Second, this situation is still developing. Follow credible Canadian news sources like CBC, CTV, Globe and Mail, and stay subscribed to Canada Pulse. Third, if this directly affects your business or employment, speak with qualified professionals, financial advisors, accountants, or industry associations. Fourth, preparation is smart. Panic is not. Diversify where it makes sense for your situation, but avoid knee-jerk reactions. Finally, contact your member of parliament if you have views on trade policy. Informed citizens strengthen our democracy. So, where does this go from here? Let me give you a roadmap of what to watch for. In the immediate future, keep an eye on official statements from Global Affairs Canada and responses to the Chinese investigations. Expect updates on implementation timelines for existing agreements. Over the next few months, watch USMCA review discussions and any further tariff adjustments. Economic indicators like export data from Statistics Canada will provide signals. Looking further ahead, the big questions involve how supply chains adapt and the balance of relationships. Key dates include investigation conclusions and any parliamentary debates. What do you think happens next? Drop your predictions in the comments, and if you're from a specific province, let us know what you're most concerned about in your region. Alright, let's wrap this up. So here's what we know for certain. China has initiated trade investigations against certain U.S. practices, while Canada has advanced limited agreements with Beijing as part of broader diversification efforts. This situation is still developing. Government responses and market reactions will shape outcomes. What we can say with confidence is that trade policy requires careful navigation. What remains uncertain is the full long-term interplay between all parties. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you the sky is falling, because it's not. But I'm also not going to pretend this doesn't matter, because it does. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Significant developments that deserve attention. Stay informed by following verified updates. Subscribe to Canada Pulse if you haven't already. We'll continue covering this as it develops, with facts without fear-mongering. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to understand what's happening. I'm your host, this is Canada Pulse, and I'll see you in the next update. Take care.